Doing last minute setup stuff on Twitch. One second. Well, doesn't look like anybody's here yet, so I'll just go ahead and get started. This is my second stream covering the watch. I did one last week. Probably should have just waited till this week, but this gives me 2 weeks of doing fan art stuff for the show that I like. Excuse me. So anyway, we're going to look at the entire first season of The Watch on BBC America. Now, I will be one of the first to say that I went into the show with pretty low expectations. Seeing the trailers and being a long-time reader of the books, it just didn't feel like Terry Pratchett's Watch. And so I went in the show with pretty low expectations. And I was both right and wrong. It's not Terry Pratchett's Watch. It's definitely not. They took a lot of liberties. They swap characters, genders, and ethnicities and stuff like that will drive some people crazy. And bringing it forward in time to kind of a steampunky thing. Yeah, hello, Professor. Professor Toffee's watching. I found out after the last stream, Professor Toffee actually works on some of the Wiki stuff. So, aloha. Do you want to join me in the stream, Professor? I can give you the link. I can find out. Let's post a link again just to be safe. If anybody would like to join me in the stream and talk about the watch, here's the link in the chat. Yeah. So anyway, like I said, the characters are there's a lot of characters are vastly different, and they're not following any particular storyline real tightly. They're like borrowing bits and pieces from different storylines. So if you've read the books, you know the first book was Guards, and so that's where we meet Vines and we meet Carrot, characters that are in the book that aren't in the show, like Navi and Colon. Detritus isn't really a guard in the first book. So just that alone, you can see there's a wide difference from that. But it does have a similar storyline where the Ankh-Morpork's dealing with the dragon. And that's the first season of the show, is dealing with this dragon and who's trying to summon the dragon and who's trying to destroy the city. And that's where the show's premise is for this first season. Now in the book it was Carcer that was not Carcer, it was Wonce. And Wonce was actually Vetenari's assistant in the books. So there's a big difference here with Wonce being a thief along with Carcer. No worries, Professor. It's true about the wiki. So if you look at the Watch wiki, Professor Toffee does some of the inputs for that. And not equipped to join the stream, but that's okay. If, like I said, if anybody wants to join, you don't have to come in with camera. It will ask you for a camera and mic when you join, but you can just opt to keep the camera off and just join in with mic, and that's fine with me too. But anyway, so I'm not sure how I want to do this though, but the last sketch session I did fuller sheets. But I think this time I've kind of set it up so I'll draw smaller, and that'll keep me able to move a little quicker and work on maybe more characters. If anybody has a character they'd like to see. By the way, this character's not in the show. This is somebody asked me to draw Navi as he might look in this version of the show, and I asked, you know, who should play Navi, and they said Rob Schneider. So I sketched a straightforward sketch of Rob Schneider, and then I put like prosthetic brows and ears on, and dirtied them up. So you can see this is Cheery Littlebottom. So if you've read the book, you can just this picture alone, you know, okay, this is not the books. And if you're the kind of person that can't get past that, the show may not be for you. It's just a sad reality. But if you can divorce yourself from the books a bit and just enjoy what they've given you, it's a fun show. I've really enjoyed it. I've done a lot of fan art for it. This is my second stream doing fan art. But this time I'm going to keep it a little lighter and a little more sketchy. So I have Sam Vimes already sketched out just to give you kind of the feel for how today's sketches are going to go. Not so large this time. But we'll just talk about characters. I've got some side notes here to give me stuff to talk about while I sketch. I'm going to start sketching. This is Karen from accounting, who I don't recall from any of the books, but it's been a while. I mean, since the last weekend, I have gone back and rewatched the show, and I have listened to the audiobooks for Guards, and Men at Arms. After I finish the stream, I'll probably start Feet of Clay. Yeah, it's been fun. So we talked about Vimes, and this is the reason I have Vimes already sketched out, because he's obviously the principal character of the show. And this is one of the things I feel like they've gotten right, kind of. This line is straight out of the book, Guards, and this is when you first meet Vimes. He's described as a skinny, unshaven collection of bad habits marinated in alcohol. And that character that Richard Dormer's playing fits that description pretty well. So I know a lot of people got bent out of shape because it's like they're thinking of Vimes like Batman, like he's already fully formed and he should be a super cop. And when we meet Vimes in the books, he's not super cop. He's what you get. He's been on the force for decades and is burnt out. He's in a city where the watch no longer functions like it used to, and everything's gone to the guilds. And the show does a pretty good job representing that. Professor saying, so about the finale, it seems like I was sort of right, sort of wrong. Carver wasn't redeemable, and Wonce actually turns out to be. Yeah, we both kind of thought that Wonce was going to be the bigger bad, and it kind of works out that way, although not the way we thought. So go ahead and start off with Karen. So Vimes, like I said, I feel Vimes is. He feels Vimesy. He may not be the Vimes you're looking for exactly. No, that's the wrong thing. I want the brush. He may not be the Vimes you're looking for exactly, but I think if you give him a chance, you can see him in there. And if they were to do a straightforward version of Vimes like the books, Richard Dormer could do it pretty well, I think. Going on to the next characters, see how Vimes. Carrot. The gentleman that plays Carrot, what's his name? Adam Hargill, I think. He does a pretty good job. I mean, he's not quite the Carrot I envisioned from the books, being the Carrot I envisioned being a little bit bigger, obviously. The name Carrot being a reference to his his physique, where he's kind of Dorito shaped, bigger on top and triangular shaped going down. But Hargill does a pretty good job getting the earnestness of the character. So that character may be at least recognizable. Again, it may not be the character you want, but you can recognize Carrot in the role being played on the watch. The other characters in there, well, here's the one thing I would say about Carrot, though, because Carrot, I think the term that I used last time was himbo, but he presents like a himbo, where he seems like he's not the brightest guy, but he actually is very bright. He's just differently educated and being raised among dwarves. So it's more acclamation than it is stupidity in the books. They haven't really gotten to that point yet with the character in the show. I don't know if they get a second season, if they'll let him develop to show he's a bit smarter than he presents in the show so far. But again, Adam Argo's doing a good job. It'd be nice to see him, a little bit bigger, but you can't get what you want all the time. Angua is quite a bit different from the books, because in the book she's described as being busty and the kind of girl that turns heads in any room she walks into. Not that Marama isn't a beautiful woman. It's just that she plays the character as kind of scruffy and more badass. And I'm kind of here for it. I really like the way the character's done on the show. And there's one scene in episode 5, Not My Watch, where they're going through the Unreal Estate, the toxic landfill from Unseen University, where they show Angua's childhood. And I really like the way they handled that, because in the books, the werewolves and humans, they kind of get along, although there's some speciesism there. But in the show, the werewolves don't get along well with humans. Basically, they can't seem to control themselves in werewolf form very well, although Angua does okay. And I kind of like the way they've taken the spin on that in the show. Got a few watchers here. Again, if anybody wants to join in, just let me know. If you can't see the link in the chat, I can post it again. Yeah, so I'm liking the way they presented Angua so far, and you do get the budding romance between Angua and Carrot. We'll see. There's a lot of this I have to say we'll see, because I don't know if they're going to get a second season or not. It's only been released in America and some other streaming services. They haven't even released it in Britain yet, or the UK. And I kind of get the feeling that they're afraid to release it in the UK, because that's where the really hardcore fans are going to be. And I think it's gotten backlash already, but I think it's going to get really bad backlash from the hardcore fans in the UK. Professor saying we didn't really get to talk about the Tritus last week. So, yeah, he was actually my next character. We can go and jump into that. Detritus. The Detritus is another one where they don't give him much story in the show. He's just there. We hear that he's Sam's best friend. They both kind of allude to that in various episodes, but we don't get any background on why they're best friends and how Vine saved him. So I think if they get future seasons, I think that would be a story that they would have to explore later on. Now, the thoughts about killing him off early and then bringing him back for the alternate universe, uh, the show has a lot of production value, but if you watch the featurette, the guy having to put that costume on, I, I kind of feel they wrote him out uh, for simplicity's sake, not necessarily story's sake. I really get the feeling that he was written out for. It could be budget, or it could just be for uh, production, because that suit looks like it was a pain in the ass to wear and actually work with in space. Uh, and well, that's another thing I want to recommend too. If you're kind of on the fence, you've watched the show and you're kind of on the fence, I'd recommend watching the featurettes, because I mean, a lot of people think they're just pulling stuff out of their ass and they're not thinking about stuff, and they really are. They just may not be thinking about it the way you want them to think about it. So the featurettes help in that regard. But so killing Detritus off, I kind of feel like that was a production or budgetary, either a monetary or time consideration, and I think that's why he was kind of written out early. Now that said, they did bring him back in the episode Nowhere in the Multiverse as an alternate version of Detritus in another down one of the other trouser legs of time. And that's actually a scene that I'm going to kind of sketch out later, where Stone speaks Stone. Again, this is where they hint that him and Detritus are best friends, at least in Sam's universe. In the universe of the show. And not necessarily the one where Sam gets shifted to. And then the hint of bringing him back, because they bring him back in an alternate universe version, but then he's able to communicate across the dimensions, apparently, because Stone speaks Stone. And I don't know if that means that we'll actually be able to get him back as a regular in the show. I think it would be more likely, and this is kind of getting ahead of myself, but I think if the show gets another season, I think where they'll end up going is back in time, because I think you need to get that backstory, and then you have you want to say auditors, but the observers, which I think are this show's version of the auditors. I think the observers, because we end on the cliffhanger with the observers, Wonce, and Vimes in that endless space. I have a feeling they may throw them both back in time to try and either eliminate Vimes, young Vimes, or the Watch, to keep him from forming the Watch or getting in the Watch. So I have a feeling we'll get a story that's similar to that if they go back, or if they get to continue. And I'm sorry I keep predicating all my senses on that, but there's no promise of right now that they'll get a season 2. So I hope they do, but I don't know. I have purchased the first season on Amazon, so I can go back and watch it anytime. I think it's a worthwhile watch. So Detritus. Now, Detritus, I'm not too crazy about the visual design, but again, when you watch the featurette, you kind of understand the decisions they made, and the modularity of the costume. Still a pain in the ass, but at least it's manageable. I think like the Detritus I see in my head, they'd probably have to do CG. I don't think there's a practical way to do that. And CG on a TV budget is generally restricted. Professor's saying either that or some people seem to think with the observer still in play, we may see more of the multiverse. Probably. I think you'll probably get 1 or 2 episodes each season where they can dip into something that affects the story but doesn't affect the world. Which would stand to reason. Karen from accounting. I don't know what she's got. I have a bunch of reference stuff, so I'm going to have to pull up images and stuff. But she's got like a melted clear plastic on her head with numbers on it. It's hard to see in the show, but yeah, I don't know what the hell that's supposed to be. But I have reference images, in case I need to look stuff up. And as far as when you compare Detritus to the book version, when we first meet Detritus, he's a bouncer, in the mended drum, if I remember correctly, and he's not the brightest. He's not bright for a troll, and trolls aren't considered that bright to begin with. Until you get into the second book in the series, the Men at Arms, where his partner Sergeant or Lance Constable Cuddy builds him a helmet that cools his brain and keeps the silicon cool like this, and he starts to think normally. So the Detritus we get in the show, I mean, he doesn't seem like a genius, but he doesn't seem like he's an idiot either. So I'm not sure if we'll see an earlier version of the Detritus from the show where he is, maybe not as bright, or is handicapped where he's not working at peak efficiency. I think that's a better way of saying it. He's not stupid. He's just not working at peak efficiency. It's like a computer that's overheating. So we'll see if they address that or not. And then one of the things that was weird was we talked about killing him, Professor. Just the fact that they killed him at all, like having him killed by some arrows, seems odd. There is some reference in, I can't remember which book, where trolls have a vulnerable spot. It's the book is vulnerable, but and I think it's supposed to be the back of the neck, if I remember correctly. He is shot in the front, in the neck, and then he's shot in the back several times in the show. So I guess we can do some hand waving and say that the vulnerable spot was just happened to be where he got hit. Because anybody that knows the book version, a bunch of arrows, you're basically shooting rocks. So arrows and rocks. Yeah. But so that scene felt weird to me. But within the confines of the universe of the show, I accepted and I'll move on. Although I was bummed when Detritus left. I was glad to see him later on in future episodes, and I hope if they get a second season that we get to see more of him. I feel for the guy that has to wear that costume though, because he's standing on about 2 feet of stilts, to give him 2 or 3 feet of stilts to give him the height. Professor, anything else you want to add on Detritus? Professor, it's about a 20-second delay between the stream and the live, so whenever I ask a question, I got to wait a little bit to make sure the person has time to answer. The next character I'm going to look at is Sybil, unless somebody wants to look at somebody else. I mentioned Cuddy. I mentioned Cuddy in the show. Cuddy is a flashback character used for Sybil's story. What about the books? Cuddy is when in Men at Arms is when they're doing that. What do they call it? Diversity hires. What do you call that? anyway, the watch, Vetenari has told the watch they need to hire some underrepresented minorities in the Discworld. And underrepresented minorities in the Discworld mean dwarves, trolls, and a werewolf. So those are the 3 new hires they bring on. So Cuddy is the dwarf, and then Detritus is the troll, and Angua is the werewolf. And then in the world of Terry Pratchett, dwarves and trolls don't get along, and it makes sense because dwarves like to pick rocks and trolls are rocks. So if you go to mine a troll, you're not going to make friends with them. So did I answer the question on Cuddy? And the professor saying Cuddy was the officer that responded to Lady Sybil's parents' murder. So he's obviously, well, I can't say he's obviously not a dwarf, because this is one of the things I find I don't care about the show so much is their lack of proper dwarves, what I consider proper dwarves. They do have some. When we see Carrot's parents, they're dwarves. There's some, you see some in the background, and I think there was I can't remember if Cherry's flashbacks had dwarves or not, because Cherry's mom's is a normal size woman, or standards, I don't know, normal. But okay, so we'll move on to Sybil, and now Sybil is one of the characters they really took a departure with. So Sybil in the books is, when you envision like the old Vikings or the old opera singers that dress with Vikings, the big women with the horns on their heads. That's kind of how Sybil is described in the books. You know, she's got huge tracts of land. It's a big woman, hardy. I think those would be a word that would be used to describe Sybil, and no indication as to ethnicity. So, you know, I can't say that they cross-raced her or anything. They didn't blackface or anything like that. But the Sybil in the show is a more svelte woman, and as such is more physical than Sybil in the books. Although Sybil in the books does get physical too. I mean, the parts about Sybil, you know, having collections of armor and weapons from her family, that's true to the books. So now that said, Sybil is a very likable character in both the book and the show. Although I have seen like people, I think it was the Watch on Twitter, you know, posted the questions like, who was your favorite villain in the show? And a lot of people put Sybil, because she was like kidnapping people off the street to re-educate them. It's like, well, I guess, yeah, technically she's a vigilante in that regard. I don't think that's what they were expecting. But I don't know. What do you think? Would you consider Sybil a villain? It's who plays Sybil? Laura something. Look it up real quick. Laura Rossi. So her take on the characters is quite a bit different. In the books, Lady Sybil is a dragon breeder. So in the show, she just has good boy Errol. But in the books, you know, she's got a whole menagerie of dragons. and breeds and rescues swamp dragons. That's another thing I think might be a budgetary issue, because dragons, no matter how you do them, is some kind of effect, whether it's practical or CGI. So this is one thing I think if anybody were ever to try and do a really faithful adaptation of any of the Discworld books, I think you'd have to do it animated almost, because the prohibition on effects costs makes it really hard to pull off. Some of the Sky series have been good. I mean, I like Hogfather. Wasn't Princewind, Two Flower. That was okay, but all of them, the effects are pared down for television and movies. Professor saying, well, it's like you said, a vigilante really, and she develops during the show. I wouldn't call her a villain yet. Although there is that one scene in the Not My Watch where they go to throw the sword away, where Sybil confronts one of her students that relapsed apparently, and she didn't seem too pleased with how Sybil abducted her and tried to re-educate her. So there's that. I just thought it was cute that people ask that question, who's your favorite villain, and people out there throwing out Sybil. I don't consider her a villain myself either, but I can see where they're coming from. This is the one thing as I get older, is like I don't want to get into arguments about stuff. It's like, okay, I get it, I understand what you're saying. I may not agree, but I'm not going to fight you over it. How about the finale though? Sybil and Blind. Pretty villainous, leaving us on that cliffhanger with with their romance. Well, yeah, I mean, you have to think that if they get to meet back up, that they'll figure it out. That hey, I didn't leave. I don't think she can get mad at him for that. Of course, I could be wrong. I don't know. Now, I tried to figure out what weapon Karen from accounting had, and it's really hard to see because in the scene where she kills somebody, it's all in motion and blurry. But I think her briefcase has like a blade that pops out of it. It was really hard to tell, but that's what I'm going with. So we'll just put a blade sticking out of the briefcase, and we'll put some blood on it. Waistcoat. Who else is watching besides you, Professor? But if anybody else is watching, what did you guys think about the cliffhanger ending? Here for it, or did it piss you off, or did you not care? Here's out the pencil so I don't mess up my markers. So that's Sybil. Because I do like the way Laura Rossi's portraying the character, or the decisions the show has made on it. I know some people have gotten upset that they took away a role for a large woman, and I get it. But again, I appreciate the character that we did get. Let's see, Dr. Crucis. Now this is another one where they swapped it. Dr. Crucis in the book is a male, or in the books is a male, and when we get to the Dr. Crucis plays more prominently in the story Men at Arms when you talk about firearms, and that was Terry's exploration of firearms, what they call the gun, Gonne, for the gun. Gun's kind of a good name for a gun, though, right? What's it do to you? It makes you gone. But I think character-wise, the attitude and stuff, I think is close enough. I mean, it's just a female instead of a male, so I can't get really bent out of shape about Crucis. Now, the books don't really have much about singing, so I can't say anything about Crucis's singing ability. There's not a whole lot of allusion to music in the books other than band blocking. Let's see, Professor's saying, so we talked somewhat last week about the musical nature of the show. Good Boys humming the theme tune turns out to be important. Does it turn out to be important? Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's. I personally found it hard to recognize his humming as as the theme, but I understand what you're saying. It was a bit of a stretch for me when she was saying she recognized it. And, but I get it, and that's a convenient plot point. In my opinion. Since we're talking about musical stuff, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way, because if you're not a fan of musical numbers, this show may really piss you off. There's a few in the show because the band, the Watch goes undercover as a band in the Musicians Guild. And then there's a dance scene in the old folks' home, what do they call it, the Twilight Canyons. And there's another musical number in the finale, which personally I think they could have done away with, but we just let Good Boy handle everything. But I don't know. The sound designer on the show follows me on Twitter. So I don't know if he's watching this or not. Maybe he can come in and answer what the passion is with the musical numbers in the show. But this is again one of those things where it's like I may not be crazy about them, but within the world of the show they work. So I just accept it. And also one of the ones where if you watch the featurettes, you'll see that the actors did play the instruments and do the singing. And, I guess Adam, the carrot, actually plays drums, and Richard plays guitar, and Joe Eaton something, the one that plays Cheery, actually sings. So the only one that really had to learn how to play was Marama, who plays Ahua. And I think they put her on bass because that way she could play the simpler rhythm tracks. And then when they did the live recording, only the drums were recorded, and then the other instruments were added back in. So this is what I mean. You get some more appreciation for what they're doing with the show, even though it may not be what you want. So I hadn't realized this thing. It didn't click with me at first. No, Professor. I mean, I get it, but it was like the speed was different. Some of the tones were different. So it didn't click with me right away that, oh, that's the theme song. So just, I have to blame myself for being slow on the uptake on that one. Talk about Crucis, Arch-Chancellor. Now they never really say what his name is. They just call him Arch or Arch-Chancellor. So I don't know if that's supposed to be Red Cully or not. And if it is supposed to be Red Cully, then he feels weird. He doesn't feel like a Red Cully type to me. So I think this may be the first Arch-Chancellor from the books. I can't remember the Arch-Chancellor's name though. And again, the show doesn't. They just call him Arch in the credits, and they just call him Arch-Chancellor in the show. So I don't know what his name is actually supposed to be. So he seems like a real dick. What did you guys think of the Arch-Chancellor from Unseen University in the show? I mean, he's like bragging about how he gave people tails and turned people into couches. It's like, I mean, that's not cool. One thing I don't know if I'm going to draw him, but I did get a picture of him for reference. But one of the things I like is if you look at his staff, you got the elephants on there. I said I got a lot of reference because I didn't know who I was going to end up ultimately drawing today. I have a few started, but part of the fun of doing this is interactivity. So if I get input, hey, you guys want to see a certain character, then I can shift gears and do another character. So that's why I've got a bunch of reference pre-printed. Let's see. So, yeah, that's about all I have to really say on the Chancellor. The guy looks okay. He looks like a wizard. He's just a dick. Alice Band, I don't know as a character from the books. That's the living doll, the one that looks like a little girl, kind of, from the Assassin's Guild. And just for me personally, on a visual design aspect, I love the way she looks. As far as visually, just the black and white, very simple design. The curved blades kept at the small of her back. I don't recognize this character from the book, and I apologize if it is. I just don't know or I don't remember. But she seems fun, and I think we're going to see more of her if we get another season because she seems to be a fan favorite. I'm not the only one. The professor saying, yeah, what you said as far as the Arch-Chancellor, we didn't really see all that much of him. That's true. You only see him a couple times, like when they're meeting with Lord Vetenari, and when they go to see him at the university for investigation purposes. So the wizards don't play a huge part in a lot of the guards books until think it's a Fifth Element. I had to go back and reread or re-listen to some of these older books that I haven't listened to in a while. But Alice Band, if you're not familiar with who Alice Band is, this is Alice Band. It's weird that they keep calling her a little girl because she's got breasts, you know, she's got a figure, and so. But the living doll aspect, I kind of buy that. Professor saying couldn't find a match on Alice Band searching with these, so it could be an original creation or a composite of other characters. Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, and I'm sure they probably did composite characters for the show based on other characters. So, like I said, I'm just not personally familiar, and I don't claim to be any kind of expert on the Discworld, so just a fan. Not a hardcore fan. I'll be the first to admit I'm not one of the hardcore fans. I have read most of the books, but I don't have like pages and scripts memorized or anything like that. But I enjoyed the show enough that I went back, and like I said, I've been diving back into the books, you know, to reacquaint. So the show has given me back the desire to go back and revisit the stories. So even if I didn't like the show, but I did, but even if I didn't, at least it gave me that impetus to go back and revisit. So Alice, just visually, I like the character. She doesn't really have a lot of lines, so it's not like I can really say much about the character herself. Wonce, like I said, Wonce. I didn't get ahead of myself. I already talked about Wonce, but Wonce in the books is a male, and so Carcer's not part of the summoning of dragons in the books, so it's all Wonce. So Wonce is like running a secret group, you know, that she's like almost like a cult. Well, he in the books. She's manipulating these people to help him bring the dragon about. And you don't find out that he's got the Summoning of Dragons book until later on in the book. So, whereas in the show, that's kind of the MacGuffin for, hey, this book is missing and we need to find out what's going on. And MacGuffin, for those of you who might not be familiar with the term, is a plot device that drives the story forward. So the Wonce here in the show, she's probably my favorite villain of the show. We'll go back to that question that was asked, as far as the character motivations and how they're portrayed in the show. She just seems like, we talked about her last week. We figured she was going to be the big bad, and she kind of ends up being, but not the way we envisioned, where she was like part of the big bad all along. It's like she becomes the big bad, but wasn't always the big bad. So it'll be interesting, you know. Obviously, if they get another season, they've already got it set up for her and Vimes to square off. But they made her a fairly sympathetic character, and I do like the fact that they touched on, you know, she wants to be a wizard, but you know, it's wizards is a man's world thing, and so she has to infiltrate the university as house cleaning. get access to learn and get access to the books and stuff like that. So we get the impression, even though they don't show it, that she's been at the university for a while. It wasn't like she was planted there for Carcer. Carcer takes advantage of the fact that she's working there. She was working there so she could have access. And I don't know what her ultimate goal is, or was. But she didn't seem evil on her own within the story as shown. What she would have done with the power when she had it, or had enough knowledge, who knows? But in the book, the character is obviously a scheming character. The librarian. Now this is kind of interesting because in the books you don't ever meet the librarians in human form. In the show, and I thought it was just bad effects at first. In the show, when we first meet the librarian, he's transitioning into what will ultimately be the orangutan form. So when I first saw him, I was like, well, that doesn't. He looks weird the first time we meet him in the show. And again, I think I was just expecting an orangutan, basically, or something like an orangutan. But there's only, I think, 2 appearances of the orangutan in the show, so there's not a whole lot to say about him. He serves his purpose. He gets him into the library, into the reading room. So, not a lot to say on the librarian. It remains to be seen if he's going to be closer to the book version or not. It would be interesting because, especially in the second book, he hangs out with the Watch a bit more. It actually becomes like an acting constable for a little bit. So that would be interesting if they actually bring the librarian in for that. Again, I don't know if that's going to come to pass or not. Karen from accounting, who I'm drawing, really just a bit character. But, just, get the throwaway lines and stuff. But Karen is just a fun throwaway character in the show. Igor's, there is an Igor in the show, but it's kind of a passing scene. He's the restaurant owner in episode 2, Ook, when they run into the goblins, the drag goblins. I don't know what's up with the drag goblins. I'm not sure who made that call. And then calling drag goblins the worst kind of goblins, I don't know. That might rub some people the wrong way. And it's weird when you look at Spike, the green goblin that we get with the Watch, versus the drag goblins. I mean, other than the shape of the nose, they don't even look like the same species. So, I'm not sure what's going on there. Into the patterns on. Karen from Vetenari. There's Karen. And then there's the identity thief. Every episode, his name is different. Oh yeah, that's another. I didn't make a note of him on my list of characters to go over, but there is a character from the Thieves Guild who's an identity thief. And if you actually look him up on IMDb, they list like a bunch of different character names because he keeps changing his name, but he doesn't change his costume. So I don't know. He's not a very good identity thief to me, but that was a cute take. The Igor that runs the bar, is what I was saying, is if you catch the featurette, you get a better look at him. And those of you who read the books, you know the Igors are, you know, they like to build themselves up from other people's parts. This is what the Igor looks like if you can catch him in the show. Can't see it in this photo, but this this eyeball has multiple pupils. And you can see he's got like a horn from a fawn, as they explain it, and this looks more like a skull cap, and then he's got half a beard. You know, you get face parts from different people. Okay, so that's Karen from accounting. I should keep my bleeder sheet. I didn't notice I didn't have a bleeder sheet. Just in case the marker goes through. So Karen from accounting, Igor's goblins. Now the goblins in the show are well, goblins don't get a lot of play in the Discworld in general. There's the books Raising Steam and I think Snuff, where we get exploration into the goblins. I think Moist von Lipwig has some interactions with goblins, and then Vimes has some interaction with goblins. And you don't get a lot of name goblins. I think the only one that I can recall is Stinky. So I wonder if Spike is going to be the. At first when they introduced Spike, I thought, is he going to be the stand-in for Nobby? Because Nobby's kind of, you know, short and not quite human, even though he's human. So I was kind of wondering about that, but I think as it's progressed, I think Spike is just going to be Spike the Goblin. So I don't know if he's going to be made a full watch officer or not, or I'm not sure if it's a he or she really at this point. It's played by a female. I know that. Played by a woman. But I don't know if Spike the Goblin is supposed to be male or female. It's hard for me to say. Did I see the story about the deleted scene in the last episode? No, what was the deleted scene in the last episode, Professor? Enlighten me. Get the reference for you. Tritus reference. Stone speaks stone. Give the professor a chance to do referencing the deleted scene. Oh, and then there's another Spike too, because Spike the Goblin is actually named after Spike the Dwarf, which was Sherry's romantic entanglement back in the mine. And this is again one. It kind of bugs me when they go back to the mine for Dark in the Dark. All the dwarves are regular size people. So I don't know if we're going to be more dwarf-sized dwarfs, but we'll see. Vetenari. Okay, now this is one there's a lot of departure from the books, obviously. Vetenari being played by a woman. It's an interesting portrayal. It's not what I would have preferred, but and I'm not even really that concerned about it being portrayed as a woman. That doesn't bother me so much. Here's the thing: it's like I'm an old comic book reader, so I've gone through all this before, where the characters are wildly different than the source material that I'm familiar with. So I think I'm kind of beyond getting bent out of shape about stuff like that. It's not worth it. But it's not the gender swap that gets me. It's the character doesn't seem as manipulative as I imagine from the book character. Or maybe I'm reading it wrong. She hinted she had overheard his confession in the mirror. There was a scene that they couldn't film because of COVID restrictions. It would have advanced the character and romance a bit more. She hinted she had overheard. Okay, when you say she hinted she had overheard, because they show the scene where she overheard it. Do you mean that she let him know that she overheard it? Because they did show that scene. Because she's on the other side of the wall from the mirror, and they pan out through the doorway so you can see Carrot on one side talking in the mirror and her on the other side. So she knows about his feelings based on the last episode. He doesn't seem to know that she shares those feelings yet. And I just finished listening to Man at Arms earlier today, which is where they hook up, and it's interesting in the book because he doesn't know she's a werewolf. He thought the diversity hire was based on her being a woman and not a werewolf. And then after their first coupling, he gets up to open a window and it happens to be a full moon. And she changes, and that startles him. It didn't go well, but obviously everything works out in the end. But okay, so she indicated to him that she had heard. That was a deleted scene. Okay. Well, that seems weird because of COVID restrictions. Because the show, unless that was a pickup shot where they did it later on, because they're plenty close in that scene there, where she could have intimated that she heard him. All she had to do was peek her head around the corner of the office. And most of the show was shot pre-COVID, so. Let's see. Anyway, Vetenari. Vetenari is played by who? And Chancellor. And one of the interesting things, which I don't really understand yet, and I don't know if the show is going to explain it, but when you see the street signs and stuff around the city with Vetenari, it's the typical Vetenari you get from the books with the mustache and the goatee, a male. So I'm not sure what the propaganda is behind that. They don't really address that in the show. It's like why she's depicted in posters and stuff as the male version of Vetenari. This note I put up on the screen, that's the professor again talking about the either deleted or unfilmed scene where Angua let Carrot know that she had heard him talking in the mirror. So while Vetenari may not be super recognizable, I think the show does a decent job with the character. I hope if they get more time, I hope they develop her a bit more and make her a little more conniving. The scene where the bit where she locks herself away at the end in the dungeon seems weird for those of us that are familiar with the books, because Vetenari was never kind of flashy, and that room was nothing but extravagance. You know, in the book, when Vetenari is locked away, it's, you know, they did get the part about, you know, like the locks being on the inside. But he has like I don't want to say a pet rat, but he has a rat, almost like a roommate, that helps him out, that he can communicate with, that helps him get stuff. And Vetenari can technically get out of the room anytime he wants, just like in the show. But it's not an extravagant room. It is a dungeon, but it's not an optimally appointed dungeon cell. So that felt a little weird. Just kind of making up stone here. Erdo. Erdo, I don't know if he's a character from the books or not. Erdo in the show is the head of the Thieves Guild, or in the alternate multiverse, he's Vimes' roommate or cellmate. Very Weasley character, so I think it's fitting for the head of the Thieves Guild to be a Weasel. Another character, CMOT Dibbler, company-owned throat Dibbler. I would have never. In fact, the first watch through, I didn't really put it together that was supposed to be CMOT Dibbler. They call her Throat, obviously, in the show, but yeah, that's one of the, again, that just didn't register me the first time I watched through it. That, oh, that's supposed to be CMOT Dibbler. So Dibbler is the woman in the wheelchair, you know, and you'll see like there's signs of her floating around the town, you know, with different scams that she's running or selling stuff, or and then at the end she becomes when Erdo is killed, she becomes the head of the Thieves Guild. They needed somebody to lead them. Professor's talking about Vetenari. Her locking herself away just felt more cowardly than anything to me. And yeah, in the books, you know, Vetenari gets locked away because the dragon actually becomes king for a little bit. So, as the deposed ruler, he's put in the dungeon, or puts himself in the dungeon. So the reasoning is obviously going to be different than the books. But yeah, it almost did feel cowardly. You're right. She did kind of explain it, that, you know, that the ruler needs to be locked away, but it didn't really sell well. So I was talking about throat. I think I'm going to learn to like this throat. She doesn't seem as quite as conniving as the throat I'm seeing in my head when I read the books, and not as much of a shyster. Although the posters sell the shyster part. If you look at some of the background scenes with the posters of throat stuff, that's where you get the shyster aspect of the character, but not so much in the interactions you have with her. And then the Thieves Guild, her being part of the Thieves Guild, was kind of threw me off, because that's much too ambitious for Dibbler. Dibbler's not a team player in the books. So having him head up a guild would seem weird. But again, I think I'm going to grow to like the version in the show if they get more time with her. Death? What do you think of Death? That was I got mixed feelings about. I love the guy's voice. That's Wendell Pierce, if I remember. Yeah, Wendell Pierce is Death. Yeah, the death of the show versus the death of the books is quite a bit different. The death in the books kind of grows into being a more human character, having more personality. The death in the show has personality built in. He's very put upon in the show. So it's an interesting take. And then he shows up way more frequently than I would anticipate, and revealing himself to people that aren't necessarily dying in the show. And it seems like just about everybody can see him at some point, or at least all the principal characters at some point can see him. So I'm not sure what the rules of the universe are for death yet. Carcer says, I felt like Death seemed mostly a comic character. I mean, things end with him asking to join the band. Yeah. And so that's a very, he's much more human than in the books. Although I did like Vimes' response there. Can I join the band? Piss off, Death. So I think I would like to see Death, even though I like the character, I think I would like to see him less frequently so that it has more impact when you see him. That's just me, though. Him playing the theremin and doing the rap, Last Breath. Yeah, again, I'm not too crazy about the musical numbers, but if you like that kind of stuff, he does a good job doing it. Just, it's not my favorite part of the show. But again, I like the guy's voice, so he makes a good sounding Death to me. I don't know if they're gonna change it. Yeah, I think you don't necessarily need to change the character, in my opinion. I just think you need to see him less so he has more impact when you do see him. Skimmer. Skimmer's another one I don't recall from the books. Skimmer is the assassin that killed Sybil's parents. And they end up locking him up, and it becomes kind of a running joke where Sybil threatens to kill him in the show. Very smarmy character. I actually kind of liked him. I mean, as a character, I wouldn't like him as a person. I wouldn't want to live with the guy or hang out with him. But as a character, I liked him. He does that Weasley bit pretty good. I'm not trying to draw this fully accurate to the character. Just trying to get the idea across. And that's. Did I miss any characters? Did, oh, Carcer. Did I skip over Carcer? Carcer in the books comes in way later than in the story than in the show. And the motivation for Carcer in the show, I mean, I've seen people talk about this. He doesn't seem like he has a lot of motive. I mean, essentially his motive is not to be erased from existence, which, okay, is a motivator, but it doesn't seem like he has a real good motivating, like, why does he want to kill Vimes or destroy the Watch, other than just to stay alive himself. I don't really feel that we get a lot of good motivation from him. So that kind of hurts the character for me. That said, the guy playing him does a good job with the role. And he's almost a sympathetic villain. The line in there where he talks about Vimes can't be good because that would make me bad, right? He doesn't feel like he's a bad guy, which is weird because you're doing bad stuff. But let's see. The professor says, "I wonder if we'll see more guilds. We get the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild, and then we find out there's a Resistance Guild." So if they do press forward, I imagine we'll have to see more guilds, because especially if they rip anything off of Men at Arms, you get the Clowns Guild, because there's a whole Assassin's Guild infiltrating the Clowns Guild in order to get access to the Gone. So I think we'll get some of that. But yeah, we'll have to see some of the other guilds. One thing that they didn't do with Carrot is, like, in the books, when Carrot first comes to Ankh-Morpork, he's staying in the Shades, and they don't really show that in the books or in the show. And he's staying in the Houses of Ill Repute, which they don't show in the show. It would be interesting if he was doing that. The relationship. Oh, Sally. I didn't mention Sally, the vampire. But the relationship with Sally just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like, how does, I don't know if she's supposed to be like an informant, or whether this is a character he just knows from running around town. It's like she shows up in the episode Nowhere in the Multiverse, when he's like checking for blood. So I don't know if she's supposed to be an informant. I get the impression he understands that she's a vampire, but he doesn't seem to be responding to her well, or taking safeguards. So I don't know. It's a weird interaction. So the professor's saying, I got that. So we talked about the guilds. What guilds would you like to see? Any in particular? I can't remember the book where we get into Vetenari's past, but that could be an interesting bit too, because Vetenari was a member of the Assassin's Guild in his, or in, if the show does it, her youth. Okay, so I think we covered most of the characters, other than people that make cameos and stuff. If you look at the show from start to finish, you start off with a near Vimes experience. You meet Vimes, and he's already talking to death. See, this, I think we need less death. Even though I like the actor, I like the way he's portrayed, I just think we need less. But yeah, some of the stuff they take like whole cloth from the books, and some feels forced and some doesn't. I think it's in the first episode where when he's met Lady Sybil, and they talk about the Vimes Boots theory of socioeconomics, and that's pretty much ripped right out of the book. Except it wasn't like thrown in your face that that's what this is by one of the characters. It is by the narration of the book, but not by one of the characters saying, "What is that? Your Boots theory of socioeconomics?" So to me, that felt kind of forced when they popped up in the show. But a lot of the fans love seeing that. It's like, oh, we got it. Different strokes, different folks. Professor's not really sure since I don't know the books. I wasn't even sure what the others. There were others until you said so. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the other guilds we get in the books. I know there's like in Thief of Time. There's a clockmakers, or I guess a clock. Yeah, clockmakers. Watchmakers Guild. Clockmakers Guild. One of the two. What's some of the other guilds? But yes, there are other guilds for sure. The Seamstresses Guild, which is not what it sounds like. I'll let you look that one up. But yeah, just about every occupation has a guild, I think. At no point do I remember them joining the Magicians Guild to go undercover, but I'm going back in and rereading and re-listening to the books, so maybe I've forgotten something. And I'll find out about it later. I don't know. But anyway, in Your Vimes experience, that's obviously the pilot episode, so they've got to introduce everybody. So we get a quick and dirty. Here's Vimes. Here's Detritus. Here's Sybil. Here's Carrot's just showing up to town. Wet behind the ears. Now, in the show, they make it seem like his dad kind of tricked him into joining the Watch to get him out from underfoot, kind of like, you need to go be among your own people. The king of the dwarves, who is Carrot's stepdad or adopted father, does want him to go out and see the world, but it's more that he's a danger because he's so big in the mines in the dwarves. So it's a little less mean. It's a little less mean of a reason. But I don't know if we'll get any more on that. So anyway, the first episode, like I said, it's quick and dirty. We get the MacGuffin. We get the fact that the book's been stolen. Introduce the characters. Then we get to episode 2, Ook, which is where we meet the librarian, and that's where we get more information about the book and why it's a concern. And it's also, unfortunately, where we lose Detritus. Pretty quickly in the show, too. So that's one of the things that bummed me out, was like losing Detritus so quickly. And then the manner he went out. So I hope we get to see more of Detritus in the future. But obviously, Vimes and crew go on the hunt for the book. The reading room is, I don't recall that being in the books, but again, I'm a few years behind, out of date, since I've read all the books. But that was kind of a neat ploy or plot point that they could use, where you could take anybody in this room to be able to read the people. I take it you want to look up the Seamstresses Guild, huh? Yeah, actually, Guild of Prostitutes. There's a line in one of the books where they want to rename it to the. It's like the red light district, but they want to rename it to the district of negotiable affection. Stone speaks song, and I like this scene, and I hope that we get another season, and we get more backstory on the Vimes to Tritus relationship. So I really like that scene. Even though his grammar, Stone speaks stone, kind of a kludgy sentence. So we talk about episode 2. That's where we meet the librarian. Like I said, when you first see the librarian, he's I guess he spent so much time in the reading room, and that's how they explain it in the story. If you spend too much time there, you regress, and he spent so much time in the reading room that he's becoming an orangutan. So when we first meet him, he's not fully transitioned yet. The second time we see him, he looks more like an orangutan, but he's not quite fully orangutan. So I still don't know if they're going to go full orangutan with him, or whether they're going to try and keep him more human or not. I'm going to post a link to the stream again if anybody wants to jump in and actually chat with us again. Otherwise, let's see, we've already gone over characters. We're going over each episode quick and dirty right now. Talking or drawing. If you have a character you'd like to see drawn, you can let me know. Episode 3 is the what. This one was where you really find out that this is not the Discworld that you may have been expecting, because that's the one where they do the band, where they go undercover in the Assassin's Guild, or undercover in the Magician's Guild, because it's adjacent to the Assassin's Guild. And this is I think this is a point they took from Men at Arms, because part of the story of Men at Arms is, that's why the Clowns Guild is is part of the story, because the Clowns Guild and the Assassin's Guild are adjacent to each other in the book. And the way they break in, well, not they, but the way the Assassin's Guild is broken into is by a room in the Clowns Guild. So I think they may have stole that idea for this, going into the Assassin's Guild via the Magician's Guild. I'll say it again. I wasn't a huge fan of the music stuff, but it grows on you, and within the universe of the show, it works. Let me show you this fan art I did here. But here's the what. That's it's like they didn't plan an art roll, which kind of is really, they don't show a lot, because you don't get any rehearsal or stuff, so they just know how to play everything. And they're legitimately playing. If you watch the featurette, like I said, you find out who's playing the instruments and who's not. Captain Keel. No, I have not drawn Captain Keel. Yeah, I have reference on I'll actually talk about Keel when I get into where we think the story might be going. I have a key. I'm gonna have to pull up a screenshot. I like drawing try to support body right now. Let's go on to do Sally. So anyway, in the what, they break into the Assassin's Guild. Again, part of the MacGuffin, I guess I kind of skipping around here, but part of the MacGuffin is this how to summon dragons. And in order to summon dragons, you have to collect certain artifacts that allow you to summon the dragon, which is a crown, a sword, and a The crown is actually like a miner's helmet. Crown, a sword. What is it? Oh, and then royal blood, which they get from the badge, from Sam Vimes' badge. Blood. But anyway, in the Assassin's Guild is where they presume that the sword is being kept, because the sword had been in possession of one of the assassins at some point. So they're breaking in there to find out more about where it's at. Like I said, they go undercover as a guild, as a musicians, as a band in the Musicians Guild, because it's adjacent. And then Lady Sybil goes undercover in the guild, in the Assassin's Guild itself, as an assassin with the mask of the assassin that killed her parents, which I'm not sure that was a good idea. And it doesn't, you know, she ends up seeing the assassin that killed her parents and then kind of going off book, off script for what she was supposed to be there for. And hilarity ensues. That's Skimmer, who we talked about earlier. The Carcer ends up getting the sword, which ends up being okay because turns out you don't need just the sword, you need the pommel to go with it, which takes you into the next episode, which is Twilight Canyons. Twilight Canyons is where you find the owner of the sword had left the pommel with her partner. I'm not sure if it's a romantic partner or a business partner. They seem like they were friends. It's not really clear in the story to me. I believe they were romantic partners. But getting the pommel, and you have to have the pommel and the sword together. And the pommel and the sword creates Gawain, the sword, which I guess we can talk about as a character also. Gawain is an interesting character in itself, as a sentient sword. Who I wouldn't trust. The scenes in Twilight Canyons, like, did you what did you think of like the dance scene, like when they have like spells on the place so that if any kind of violence breaks out, it causes everybody to stop the violence and start dancing. Weird, but okay. Now there is some of the comedic relief in the show are these goblins that are like talking about overthrowing their oppressive government, and you meet them in the first episode when Vimes is confronting Throat while they're trying to find the book, and in the battle where Detritus dies, you know, one of the goblins supposedly dies too, and then you find out later at this episode, Twilight Canyons, that they were like a husband and wife, and one of the partners had moved on and started a relationship with another goblin, and then when he sees his wife in the Twilight Canyons, they end up getting back together, and the other person gets jilted, and it's just a weird comedic relief element in the show. This is Professor talking about the magic safety in the Twilight Canyons that causes everybody to dance. Yeah. So I may not be a musical guy, so maybe that's why I'm not too keen on the stuff, but it works within the show. And I'll tell you this: when you watch the featurettes and stuff, it looks like these people really enjoyed making the show, and that's a big thing for me too. I enjoy watching people enjoy what they're doing, you know. So. So by the end of Twilight Canyons, they've gathered all the pieces to the sword. They try interrogating the sword, and the sword's very smarmy and a smart ass. In the 5th episode, Not My Watch, Blimes makes the decision that nobody should have the sword. Nobody should have that kind of power to summon dragons. So the Not My Watch is where he determines that he's going to throw it into the lake in the Unreal Estate. And again, the Unreal Estate is the Discworld equivalent to a toxic landfill. It's basically the overflow of magic from Unseen University. And the magic affects the landscape. So it's a desert, but there's like things will pop in and out of existence there, and you'll get stuff from our world, the round world, that show up in the Discworld. And then it also appears to like attack, I don't want to say attack people, but it like puts them through the ringer, like going through bad memories. So we get the first hint of the dark from Cheery. And, well, that's his character. I don't want to talk about Cheery. Cheery Littlebottom. I'll circle back to that. We get one of my favorite scenes in the show is when they do the childhood flashback of Angua, where they show her grandmother chaining her out into the woods, because she has to confront the fact that she's a werewolf, and werewolves don't live with humans. So her grandmother takes her out in the woods and stakes her out, chains her to the woods, and then leaves her. And then later in the night sends her best friend to go see her, to rescue her, and knowing that she's going to change. And so she changes and kills her best friend, and then, you know, she's mad at her grandmother, and it's going to tell her mom, but her mom knew about it already. So this is when, you know, you had to find out that, you know, werewolves don't live with humans, kind of thing. It was a really powerful scene, you know, and I think that's I think that was a good story beat. So back in the canyons, the song they use, "Wake Me Up," I feel like some people may have had fatigue on it because it was used for a gag recently in The Flight Attendant. I haven't watched The Flight Attendant. I really probably should, though. And that's the Kaylee Coco show, right? My wife doesn't watch the show with me, but I think she would have liked that because she was a George Michael fan. That's George Michael, I remember. Wake Me Up Before You Go There. I hear the song in my head. So when they finally get to the lake, he tries to throw the sword in, and the lady of the lake throws the sword back. And we get that line about, they need to resist. Now here's one thing. There's a scene later on back at the watch house when like somebody graffitied a fist outside the watch doors, and Sybil shows that no, that's the city starting to believe in you, and we need to resist. But if you go back and rewatch the first episode, that painting's already there. So I don't know if there was just a continuity error, or they wanted to write it into the show somehow, or whether it was planned that way. Was the Kaylee Coco show the flight attendant. For second season, it was conceived as a miniseries. And then the sword is the one that brings up Dark in the Dark to Cheery. Oh, and that's also the scene with Sybil, where we see Sybil confronting one of her failed students from her reform efforts. Carrot and Angua didn't go into the desert until later, so we don't know. They didn't really give us anything on Carrot, I don't know, right? I don't see any traumatic events from Carrot's childhood. We do see Cheery as a child, when she had a beard there. Sorry, my voice is going. So in the next episode, Cheery admits to Sybil that she understands what the sword meant by the Dark in the Dark. And that leads them to where the next artifact is for the summoning of dragons, which is the crown, which again is a miner's helmet. So they go back into the mines where Cheery grew up. And we meet Spike, and we get Cheery's birth name, which takes 6 minutes to say, and I'm not even going to attempt. In fact, they don't even give you the whole thing. It's like she starts saying her name, invoking her name to get access, because her dad used to be the mine leader, or the equivalent of a king. They actually do that. She starts, and then you get that 6 minutes later, and she's finishing up. Yeah, I don't think we get any traumatic experiences from Karen's past in the Unreal Estate. So in the Dark, there's basically they're trying to get access to the helmet, and to do that, they're trying to convince the dwarves there to give them the helmet. When who should show up but Carcer and Wonce, who tricked the dwarves into giving them the helmet, and not only that, but convincing them that the gang that Angua, Cheery, and Carrot are actually the bad guys. So the Dark is this dwarven. I kind of liken it to like the boogeyman. It's like this dwarven thing that, if you don't conform, you're staked out, and the Dark in the Dark comes to take you away, or they assume that you're being killed, which when you think about it, it seems like a pretty safe assumption given the way the Dark in the Dark works. And Dark in the Dark turns out to be, I want to say, like a dimensional gateway. It seems to have some sentience, or else it's driven by people in it. I'm not sure. It wasn't really made clear. But Cherry thinks she's about to be killed, and instead she's engulfed in this dark in the dark, and her mother's in it. Saying you don't need to be afraid of the dark in the dark. You can harness it. And then inside she sees like different versions of herself from other universes. You know, one where she's more male in a suit, and one where she's basically a drag queen, and then another where she's kind of in between, like a butch type with the vest and stuff. So the dark in the dark is this dimensional gateway that allows you to access like any version of yourself. And her mother, rescues her and then brings her in and like shows her how to manipulate the dark in the dark. I'm not saying as well. Professor is saying, I feel like the scene where Cherry learns the truth about the dark in the dark is definitely one of the most powerful in the show. Yeah, and I wish that we could have heard what her mother whispered to her. At that moment. But you're right. It was a pretty powerful moment. Let me ask you something, Professor. How did you come to be working on the Watch Wiki? But Carcer's still one step ahead of him on everything, and he gets away with the helmet. Wait a minute. No, I'm pretty sure he gets away with it. Because the thing is, the observers that are the ones manipulating Carcer all this time, they pull him out of the frying pan whenever he gets in too deep of trouble. And this is one of those cases, if I remember, where the observers pull him out before the dark in the dark can take him away. The dark in the dark is also used at the end of the episode to banish Dr. Crucis and the assassins that have got Sybil and Vimes kind of trapped in the dungeon. So it's an interesting power. When they confront Crucis, it's interesting where Cherry's actually playing her own voice back to her and song, and doing a dance number to Dr. Crucis's own voice and music. I'm not sure I understand completely what happened there, but it's fun to watch. You get Angua. I don't have a picture of Carrot, but Carrot and Angua were the backup dancers for her. You have a picture of Cheery, though. Cheery looking fabulous. Oh, okay. Don't rely on me as a source for anything. I can tell you that. My knowledge is pretty out of date. Has it gotten traffic? Just out of curiosity, or is that something you have information or have privy to? I'm wondering how popular the show is. So I would like to see it continue. But I'm concerned that the numbers may not be there. We passed Dark in the Dark. Next episode is Nowhere in the Multiverse, which is where we get to see the alternate universe version of Sam Vimes. It's a weird plan. The observers want Vimes to be evil, and the arrangement is, give us the worst version of Sam Vimes in all of the multiverses, and we'll have that Vimes kill Lady Sybil, which will bring about the fall of Vimes and presumably the Watch and what they'll become. It seems like a very convoluted premise to do. Well, we do a body swap between the dimensions, or not a body swap, a mind swap between the Vimes in this universe and the Vimes in the multiverse, where Vimes is in the Tanty, which is basically prison. He's been there. It's kind of a role reversal for him and Carcer, where instead of him going undercover as an officer in the guard, Carcer went undercover, and then obviously Vimes didn't die in that version, but he did end up going to the jail, and Carcer stayed in the Watch, and so you get Captain Carcer instead of Captain Vimes. And then Vimes has been in the Tanty for 20 years or so. Captain Carcer, comes to visit every now and then to check up on his old friend. Although I have to wonder how good of friends they are to have Vimes rotting in jail for 20 years, not getting him out a little bit early. You would think, maybe. Well, pull some strings. Although you don't get any idea what his behavior was in the jail, so maybe he just hasn't been a good prisoner. We see Erdo, who was killed in the other world, is alive, and his cellmate in this world. He's obviously not head of the Thieves Guild. Just in the question of traffic and stuff. Pressure's saying it's hard to say if the ratings are not good at all. If we're purely down to the ratings, basically there's no question would be a no. Yeah, and that's what I'm afraid of. And the fact that it's not playing in the UK is another kind of worrying bit of information for me as far as the viability of the show going forward. So if you can't get that fan base on your side, I don't know if you can grow it enough just from the people that don't know the books. I'll be proven wrong though. But one of the, I think, again, my favorite part in this alternate universe TNT is getting to see this version's Tritus, who's also in jail, but doesn't seem like he's that bad of a guy when he meets Vimes. Although he's basically punishment for other criminals. So they throw him down to the monster, which is Detritus. So I guess he's been eating people. So it's very reminiscent of, if you watch Solo, the Han Solo movie, how they meet. Like Han Solo's thrown into the pit with the Wookiee, expecting the Wookiee to eat him. And I guess the implication is Chewie's been eating people for a while. So the implication here is that the Tritus has been eating people for a while. So it's an interesting take. So I'm going to put a couple splashes of color on the Sally here. Yeah, it reminded me very much of the scene in Solo where Han's thrown into the pit with Chewie. Yeah, except in Solo, he's saved by the fact that he can actually understand Chewie. In the show, Vimes is saved by the fact that he convinces the Tritus that he's not the Sam from this world. And the way that see, now this is where the Tritus doesn't seem as slow on the uptake in the show as he does in the books. See, this Tritus asks Sam, when did your arm grow back? It's like, well, and Vimes is confused because he's like, I lost my arm. And then the Tritus says, no, but you thought you did. So that's how he knows that that's not his Vimes. So weird little scene, but I liked it. And then, I'm sorry, what were you saying? Not sure, but I think they said the Vimes in the alternate universe was in and out of jail. It wasn't 20 consecutive years. Okay, that was fine. Yeah, trick question. So that trick question kind of gives the hint that this Detritus isn't as slow on the uptake as the Detritus in the books. At least not the Detritus without his cooling helmet. Now, there's a gentleman I've spoken to on Twitter that was kind of hurt by the way they did Detritus because I guess Detritus is a proxy kind of for people with learning disabilities. And I never really thought of it that way, but it makes sense when I talk to this gentleman. So I don't know if that will be addressed in the show later on. You know, if they give Detritus a helmet that cools his noggin down and lets him think easier, that would be kind of interesting. but getting in this nowhere in the multiverse, getting volumes back together with Detritus was kind of cool. In the meantime, the Detritus from the crappy version of Vimes, rather, is floating around Vimes' world, and doesn't. He's tricked by Carcer, to do what Carcer wants him to do. But even this crappy version of Vine can't bring himself to kill Lady Sybil, so it all works out in the end there. But when you get down to this last episode, into the better to light a candle, it's like, ultimately, Carcer has all the artifacts. So this whole season trying to chase him down and get to the artifacts ahead of him, he's always like one step ahead of him. But it doesn't go well for him. In the book, because the summoning is done through magic in a dark room, it's basically Wonce brings the dragon into this dimension, but Wonce is kind of driving the dragon, with his thoughts. In this one, Carcer doesn't have any real control. So in the book, the dragon, they get to the point that the whole thing with the book was they were trying to get a king. So they needed the dragon to be slayed to put a king on the throne. And the king was somebody that was going to be propped up that Wonce could control. Like the evil vizier. But in the book, the dragon figures out how to summon himself, kind of reverse the trail, like getting into Wonce's brain and stuff like that, and how to get back to the real world, not the world that they are from. And that's how the king ends up, because he kills the would-be king, and he takes over the throne and makes Wonce his puppet. So that's wildly different from the book, obviously. I don't know. The whole ending to me was it was okay. I wasn't particularly crazy about the resolution with Good Boy Earl and the needing of the last concert there to play the theme song to the show, which is what we were talking about with the professor earlier. That the theme song is what Good Boy Earl was playing. Yeah, it's weird for me. So overall I enjoyed the show. I really like the characters, even though they're not the characters I'm used to or may have known. But I've enjoyed it. Professor, anything else you want to talk about here, or any questions or comments? I do have the reading list of books if anybody wants to go back and track down the actual source material. The first book is Guards. After that's Men at Arms, and then Feet of Clay, and then Jingo, and the Fifth Elephant, the Night Watch, Thud, and Snuff. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books in the Watch series. And then there's a short novella between the first two books called Theater of Cruelty. That's one I actually haven't read. I just found out about that, so I'm going to have to go track that down and read it. I've read all the others, but it's been a while. So I'm going back and doing a reread right now, or re-listen. Because as I get older, it's hard for me to look at books now. So I've done Guards, and I've done Men at Arms. I'm going to start Feet of Clay today. I didn't go as many as I was hoping. Did more talking this time. 2, 3. Go ahead. Oh shoot, did bleed. Darn it! I forgot to pull my bleed sheet through. I had meant to do Spike. Spike. I'll have to use some color in here to cover up the bleed. I do have a source for a lot of the books. A lot of the audiobooks can be found here on this Golden Audiobook site. And then I listen to them on Audible as well. I don't mind paying for them. I like Terry Pratchett, obviously. I have some in my library already, like Guards. I had already downloaded. Somewhere in my house, I have the books. Start digging through stuff. But I think I'm going to wrap that up then. I'm going to continue to draw, but I'm just not going to do it online. So we did Sally. We did Limes and Detritus. And we did Karen from accounting. And I've got Spike sketched up, and I've got Carcer sketched up to do later. Full body detritus, or more body detritus. Thanks for joining. I try to stream about once a week, but I don't know what my next topic's going to be. I think I need to do a stream for Black History Month, so I'll do something there. All right. Professor, let's see. What's she saying? We pull up the list. Okay, I've heard about Good Omens. I haven't watched the show. I've read the book. It's a fun story. It's very, for me, it's very reminiscent of. There's a book by Mark Twain, or a short story series by Mark Twain called Letters from the Earth, which is basically Lucifer and one of the angels writing letters back and forth about Earth and humans. And then Good Omens is kind of a riff on that, but instead of writing letters back and forth, they're actually working with each other. So yeah, it's a fun read. I haven't watched the show yet, but I understand the show's good. But, all right, take care. Aloha. Thanks for joining me, Professor. It's good to have someone to talk to. All right, aloha.